World War. Almost every nation, from east to west and north to south, was involved in this war, including America. Some may ask, how did the United States get involved? Or some may ask, how did it start for us? Well, it took one event for us to enter, the bombing of Pearl Harbor. The bombing of Pearl Harbor was when the Japanese bombed the Hawaiian port holding most of our major Navy supplies, mostly warships. I know, you're still thinking, why would the Japanese do this? Although other reasons are still suspected, the most plausible reason for this evil attack is that it was the Japanese' juvenile way of lashing out. Why were they lashing out at us? Well, the Japanese felt that they were left with nowhere to go once their armed forces and economy were failing immensely, and they blamed it all on us. When the Japanese invaded China, the US told them not to, but they didn't listen. So they had to pay the consequences. So what was Pearl Harbor? Pearl Harbor was a port at which the American Navy kept their most powerful and destructive war supplies, mostly warships. This included aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, and much more. These ships were originally held at a port in San Diego, but they moved them all to Pearl Harbor, ironically enough, due to the possibility that the Japanese may attack. Obviously, this change of scenery did not stop them. At the time, the Japanese felt very desperate to expand, so they decided to expand into China. The United States didn't really like this, and after some warnings, the Japanese still continued to expand. The United States did not appreciate the unbelievable, absolute, disgusting, inhumane disrespect that they were receiving from the Japanese, so they had to punish them. They did this by taking away their oil. Technically, they put an embargo on exporting any oil, iron, steel, and scrap iron to them, like they deserved. After the U.S. took away the Japanese oil, the Japanese did not take it well, and this is what led up to Pearl Harbor. Definitely these kinds of people. As mentioned before, the Japanese really wanted to expand. They felt they needed to expand for multiple reasons. The main reason was because they were growing, but they couldn't support their people. The Japanese population was growing rapidly, and due to the Japanese' major lack of natural resources, they had to import all food, oil, and other necessary products to keep the Japanese people alive. Because of all of this importing, the Japanese economy was going way down. So to have more room for citizens, and to go to a place where more natural resources are available, they felt they needed to expand. They decided that a place that fit all these criteria was China. China held all the natural resources they needed so they wouldn't have to import anything, and considering the fact that China was very large, it also provided more room for the Japanese citizens to live in. So the Japanese invaded China. The US and China were good allies, so the US naturally didn't want the Japanese to invade China. Because of the alliance, the US warned the Japanese not to do this. When the Japanese ignored the United States warning, the US did not take it lightly, and they felt that the Japanese needed to be punished. The next step, punishment. The US didn't appreciate the Japanese continuing to go against their wishes, so they decided it would be a good idea to stop all exports from America to Japan. This included materials such as iron, steel, and especially oil. The Japanese depended on other people's oil. Because they had such a lack of natural resources, they depended on supplies that they could get from anyone and anywhere else. They knew that without America's oil imports, they would be lost, and indeed they were. After these exports stopped, the Japanese armed forces and economy went way down. The Japanese obviously did not take this lightly. They felt so angry and betrayed by the US for doing this to their country that they were not going down without a fight. Because of the anger of the oil embargo, and to get ahead in a potential war, bombing Pearl Harbor seemed like the perfect idea to the Japanese. To refresh your knowledge of earlier, Pearl Harbor was a port in Hawaii which the United States Navy stationed many of their more important war supplies and warships. They moved this from San Diego because they had warning that the Japanese may attack, but obviously that didn't matter. The Hawaiian port of Pearl Harbor held so many advanced ships and supplies that the American armed forces would be devastated if they were destroyed. So, if the Japanese were going to ruin any of the U.S. Navy ports, why not destroy the biggest and the most powerful one? AKA, the one that could destroy you the easiest and the fastest if you were going against it in war. The Japanese were expecting the U.S. to start a war soon anyways, so they decided that this would also be a good method to get ahead of them. But that's not the only reason why they attacked. The main reason was to get back at them, all starting with a desperate attempt to expand. Japan ended up being in much more trouble when they first started out, and America ended up being bombed. If America hadn't left Japan stranded with no oil, maybe we wouldn't have gone bombed. But on China's behalf, we had no choice. Did we bring this war upon ourselves? And should we have just stayed out of what may have been considered the Japanese's and the Chinese's business? That just may be one of those things we will never know, but it seems very possible. War and invasions can take such a toll on countries, and if nothing else, hopefully the world will learn that soon. The Japanese invasion of China not only affected both China and Japan, but also America, and more than likely other nations too. So remember, although it may not be directly, war, invasions, and basically any kind of major confrontation may just affect other nations and people in very devastating ways, along with the primary nations and people, of course. Thank you.